So there's been some wide-ranging debate in the US about hate speech and laws around hate speech um, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death and liberals celebrating his death. And in particular, Pam Bondi, who is the um, Attorney General of the United States of America, said something about prosecuting people for hate speech, and she was crucified by certain segments of conservative America. And I think that Americans might want to consider their stance on hate speech because some of the things that were said about Charlie Kirk after his death, there should be a legal process of prosecuting those people. But currently, there exists no such process in the US because of the current legal framework. And I know that a lot of my American friends who are conservatives are very weary of hate speech being prosecuted because they think that it would be abused to prosecute protected speech. But I would say that there have been some instances of having hate speech laws which are very narrow and whose scope is also very narrow and whose interpretation is not up to whoever can just interpret it based on I don't like what you're saying, therefore um, you are committing hate speech. I would use an example of some of the South African laws that relate to hate speech. And generally, what they cover is under the law that covers hate speech in South Africa is that it is defined as a communication that demonstrates a clear intention to be harmful or to incite harm and to promote, propagate hatred based on protected characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and others. And others obviously include political opinion, and it also includes um, discriminating on people based on their free speech. I know, right? But the way that it is prosecuted, it is very narrow. That it includes obviously inciting violence needs to be a crime in the United States that is punishable by prison time or a fine. But inciting violence has to be clearly defined. The problem in the United States is that Democrats and Republicans won't be able to agree on proper definitions. But if you have a law that has a very narrow scope, that clearly defines what is inciting violence, and then it clearly defines what is hate, it mustn't be up to interpretation. Um, and then it must, and then when then judges must also employ an objective standard to judge whether something is hate speech or not a subjective standard. So if you have a situation like that, as it is in South Africa, which is a law that I actually fully agree with, um, where people have gone to prison for uttering clearly racist statements. And the reason why, for instance, you might need hate speech laws is because of the Bill of Rights, which the South African Bill of Rights is similar to the American Bill of Rights, where it says that people have a right to dignity. So one of the things that hate speech laws does, it protects people's right to dignity. So that's really where the narrow definition goes, where obviously it's a prohibition of inciting of violence, where it has to be overt and it has to be clear that you're inciting violence. Number two, it has to be based on an objective analysis of whether are you violating someone's right to dignity. That is really where the hate element gets to be tested. The issue of violating someone's dignity. And it has to be an objective analysis. It has to be an objective standard, not subject to conservative biases or subject to liberal biases. It has to be that everyone of whatever political persuasion agrees that someone's right to dignity has been violated. And a lot of the times, the issues that are violating people's dignity are comments that disparage someone's dignity on account of their race, ethnicity, gender, and religion, and sexual orientation. So, for instance, let me make an example where where in the sort of legal framework, it is not a crime to believe that homosexuality is a sin, but it is a crime to call someone a faggot. And I don't know why would someone want to defend the right to call someone a faggot, because that is clearly something that is intended to attack someone's dignity, while the other statement that says homosexuality is a sin and that if you're practicing homosexuality you will go to hell is not intended to attack your dignity. And it's a similar example where, for instance, where so if someone makes racist statements like, I'll use South African examples like kafir, are considered as hate speech. Or in the United States, terms like nigger would be considered as hate speech. Yes. But the problem is that Americans want to have the right to use terms such as nigger and phrase such as faggot. And the problem that, and it's not just that it's people, it's white people who want to have a right to use the word nigger. It's also black people who want to have a right to use the word nigger. And people, yeah, but obviously the use of those words, also because also the judging of whether something is hate speech will also be context based, where there would be instances where a word that is deemed as hate speech could be acceptable to use. But that sort of process of lawmaking, of making a law such as this, requires a very deliberate effort, which, looking into the nature of American politics, it might not be a deliberate process that would be possible, looking in terms of how explosive American politics is and how divisive American politics is, where both sides will want to be grandstanding and virtue signaling on this issue and will end up not getting anywhere. But with that said, I don't even think that anyone has been prosecuted for inciting of that one of inciting of violence should be an easy one. Because even if you don't agree with the issue of hate speech, but the issue of inciting of violence, there should be a a law that prohibits inciting of violence, including celebrating of violence. There should be a clear law which prescribes prison time or a fine, but at the very least, the person must be convicted. It must carry a felony offense to incite crime and to incite violence and to celebrate violence. So, and I'm saying it has to be a felony. It can't be a misdemeanor. Incitement of violence can't be a misdemeanor. It will have to be a felony. Yeah. So let me know what you think about that. I think, I think because the First Amendment right, for instance, has to be balanced with the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights in America states that people have a right to dignity. And this issue of right to dignity is an issue at the heart of a lot of these hate speech laws. Yeah, but let me know what you think about that. If a hate speech law were to be passed in the United States, what sort of parameters would you would like to see? But I also see in terms of why it wouldn't be advisable in the United States is because you have judges who do not follow the law but who follow that ideology, and people go around judge shopping to find judges who rule in favor of their own um, preferences, which would mean that even if you have a properly defined hate law speech, it would be abused in areas like California and New York, where you have liberal jurists who are busy penalizing conservatives or people who they disfavor based on political rulings. Yeah, so maybe with that said, that would probably be where the limitation would be, which then people will argue that maybe there is no need for hate speech laws in the United States of America. Let me know what you think. Cheers.